Before we get to my review of Jerry, I have a couple things to talk about. Did you know there was a Kickstarter for the 10th year anniversary of Card Wars?
What's Card Wars?
It's a fantasy card game that's super complicated and awesome.
I somehow completely missed out on that campaign while it was active. Luckily, late pledges are still being accepted until February the 20th if you have yet to get in on this mathematical opportunity. The Flooper of Pigs tier comes with 12 pre-made decks, promo cards, all cards from the Booster Pack collection, and even brand new Kickstarter exclusive cards. The Card Warrior tier includes a collector's storage box and the Doubles Tournament expansion for 2 vs 2 gameplay inspired by the episode Daddy Daughter Card Wars, which brings the total amount of cards you get to over 800. And finally, the Cool Guy tier has a bunch of extra goodies like a playmat, bag of tokens, a role-playing module, tuck boxes for your decks, and 900 sleeves so you can protect your entire collection. Plus, Cool Guy and Dweeb mini mugs.
It looks like you are the dweeb and I'm the cool guy.
For disclosure, Cryptozoic Entertainment got me in on that Cool Guy tier for spreading the word. Don't delay, you only have until the 20th of this month. And when you play the game, make sure not to be like Jake.
In your face!
In other news since my last upload, Season 2 of Fionna and Cake has been greenlit. The first season wrapped up fairly conclusively, so I'm curious what direction the continuation will take. Something that felt like a loose end was Cake and Fionna being able to transform objects, and even organisms, into more mundane versions of themselves. Yet Season 1 ended without this culminating into a bigger plot point. Maybe the second season will build more on this magic-draining, mundanification ability. Personally, rather than continuing adventuring with Fionna and Cake, I'd rather have a spin-off set 1,000 years plus in the future focusing on the adventures of Shermie and Beth. But I am still excited, and if the Adventure Time follow-ups continue to do well, perhaps we can have both of those things. Okay then, with that covered, let's now discuss the 8th episode of the first season of Fionna and Cake.
Be careful. You don't know what's out there!
This title card drop was a really fun way of establishing the mystery behind Jerry's identity and what happened to this lifeless universe. I failed to guess that Jerry was none other than the Lich until the very last few seconds prior to the reveal. I was fixated on the thought that the peculiar static-seeming backgrounds that paint the sky in this world would have something to do with Jerry, and that red herring majorly distracted me from considering the events in the Season 5 episodes Finn the Human and Jake the Dog. It was upon seeing that familiar green lighting when Simon enters the tomb that it finally clicked for me that this universe was created from the Lich's wish to Prismo for the extinction of all life. Despite the Lich's wish being overwritten by Jake's wish,
I wish for the extinction of all life, for Finn and Jake to go back home to Ooo.
The Lich's original wish nonetheless still created its own branched universe that our heroes now find themselves stuck in with a broken remote that's all out of juice. Cake and Fionna continue the beef they had from the previous episode in regards to whether sticking it out in Vampire World was worth the risk.
Oh, great! We left Monster World and ended up in Crap World.
Cake is pouty, to put it lightly, for most of the episode. She bounces between adoration at Bimo and his tales of Jake the Dog, and bitter resentment toward her roommate.
I love this little box!
Yeah, he's so cute.
Even Bimo's cuteness has its limits, however, and Cake flippantly jokes about offing herself when the ray of hope to escape Crap World turned out to just be Bimo being Bimo.
I'm the beautiful and brilliant Princess Bubblegum.
Great! I'm gonna go eat chocolate.
Cake, no!
I'm gonna!
Cake sees Fionna's decision to jump to the next world as a mistake in terms of risk assessment. In her opinion, their quest was on the edge of completion until Fionna's unnecessary interference. More so, Cake takes it as a personal slight. She perceives it as Fionna's lack of trust in her capabilities. It seems probable that this squabble might be the most conflict the two have ever had between them in their entire lives. Cake's anger-fueled freakout in the middle of the episode contributed to Fionna's own breakdown.
We blew it! We blew it!
What's important to remember here is that Fionna was already in possession of the Ice Crown at this point in time, but was keeping that fact secret from Simon and Cake.
I put the crown inside my kick drum!
Fionna's mind was already in a fragile state from the many accumulated doubts about their quest. She had seen footage of who Simon would transform into and realized that cool ice wizard tremendously oversells how thrilling it is to be the Ice King.
Simon, you can't change into that super sad guy.
I do feel like we should have witnessed far more pitiful clips on that tape to really drive that point home. The recorded shenanigans were hardly Ice King at his worst. He even did a goofy cover of Marceline's Everything Stays, which retroactively establishes that Ice King heard Marcy perform that song at some point in history before Season 5.
Simon, you gotta see this!
I'm going to go look in this other pile.
Getting frustrated at a penguin is relatively milquetoast. I was genuinely surprised there weren't clips of Ice King interacting with imprisoned princesses that he kidnapped or something along those lines. Fionna and Cake not reacting to Ice King becoming a skeleton at the end felt rather odd too, but I guess we're supposed to assume they merely failed to notice it. But yeah, back to Fionna's mental state. In addition to her realizing what the curse of the crown would do to Simon, the group's travels across the multiverse showcased the dangers and horrors that can come with a more magical existence, and Fionna feels hesitant about making a choice to fundamentally flip their home universe without the consent of the folks who live within it. So when Cake hits her breaking point and loses it and starts to destroy inanimate objects, Cake is doing so because she thinks they reached a dead end in their journey, while Fionna is actually grappling with the existential indecision about their objectives, in addition to the guilt from concealing the item that Cake is losing her shit over. On my first watch of the episode, Fionna's emotional breakdown seemed a tad too sudden, but it made total sense once you find out that she had the ice crown in her backpack at the time. Despite Cake and Fionna's quarrels throughout this episode, when push comes to shove and the group decides to continue with their original plan, their camaraderie really shines through. I adored how Cake understood what Fionna was feeling without the need for words.
Whatever happens next, I want you to know.
This tender moment highlighted the strength of their bond and how much love the two have for each other. Their hearts being in sync fills them both with steadfast resolve as they sprint into Simon's cranium. Speaking of heroic hearts, I want to shift gears back to BMO.
Behold my naked innards and the heart of a hero!
I couldn't help but wonder, had Fionna been forthcoming about locating the Ice Crown, would the little robot have survived? It's not like it's Fionna's fault that BMO died, of course, cause how was she supposed to anticipate such catastrophic system failure? I guess if you do somehow consider Fionna responsible for the outcome, you can also blame Simon, since it was his love story that inspired BMO to jumpstart the remote. Really though, what happened here was that BMO got some bad advice from Princess Bubblegum.
Theoretically, that could work, but it would take the bravest little heart the world has ever known.
The melted innards of BMO were surprisingly gruesome. She's made of inorganic components, yet I would still classify this as gore. While BMO overloading/overheating was horrific, I still laughed really fucking hard. BMO always bounces back until he doesn't. Before this season ended, I predicted that maybe BMO's noble stunt might somehow resolve with her mind integrating into Prismo's interface after the remote finds its way back to the time room, but the brave little robot seems to be in the ground for good.
Farewell, you little miracle.
If not for all the interspersed flashbacks to how Simon and Betty grew closer and eventually hooked up, this episode would have been remarkably grim. The sentimental recollections of Simon provided saccharine breaks from the desperation felt by our crew, but for the most part, I was lukewarm about these flashbacks, because they retread character dynamics that have already been established in previous episodes. In the Season 10 episode, Temple of Mars, Magic Woman looked back at her old self and contemplated on her entire identity being wrapped around Simon.
I met Simon the next day, and he was just so amazing. I put everything on hold to help him search for the Enchiridion.
Temple of Mars already covered the general backstory that Simon recounts in Jerry, albeit in a highly concise way. Do you remember the Season 7 episode, Broke His Crown, where Simon described how he and Betty met?
When we both reached for the same book in the library, and I said you should check it out first?
Jerry references that chance encounter.
I touched his hand in the library once.
The Simon within the crown spoke about the note Betty left in the book for him, and what a profound effect it had.
It was the funniest, smartest note I've ever read.
Jerry directly depicts this event and its immediate aftermath.
This book is terrible. It's written as if the author was aiming for an audience of one. His own ass?
One can easily say that Jerry is fleshing things out, and indeed it is, but the additional melodrama does not provide new context. It merely expatiates on what was already implied. Witnessing these events in full wasn't that interesting to me, because they didn't provide anything fundamentally new about Simon and Betty's relationship.
Petrikov.
Betty, it wasn't stupid, it was incredible.
We do learn that the music Cake has been hearing since the start of this season,
That was our song. Betty's and mine.
Titled Everything in You and performed by Half Shy, this was a very pleasant sound. But two characters sensually caressing each other isn't exactly compelling for me. We already know Betty and Simon are enamored by each other, so it just came off like highly aesthetic fluff. Something that I did get a big kick out of, though, was finding out that, in order to be by Simon's side, Betty missed out on not just one, but 2 trips to the Australian outback to study petroglyphs. Fionna had the right idea here, and it's something Simon didn't even consider.
So you got on the bus with her?
Yep. No. Why would I?
Now, typically, an academic can't just hop onto a research expedition at the very last minute, like Fionna is suggesting, but really what Simon should have done is let Betty go on her trip, but stay in contact as much as possible through mail or email, and then plan for journeys together after Betty returns. What happens instead is that Simon inadvertently leans into making himself the center of Betty's life. And he does not contemplate on this, at least not until the next couple episodes. The imbalanced power dynamic between the two is also very much worth keeping in mind, because Betty was a fan of Simon and his research before the two ever even met, and Simon has a doctorate while Betty appears to be a grad student. These conditions made it easier for Simon to be the center of gravity in their relationship. Thank Glob they did not write Simon to be her actual professor. Speaking of Simon's place in academia, he comes off as such a kook.
You can't actually believe that these objects exist.
I do. We just need sufficient imagination to seek them.
That's a terrible way to justify the validity of dubious claims. But hey, Simon does find the Enchiridion with Betty, and all those other artifacts he mentioned do exist, as they've appeared in Adventure Time before. The following is a preference rather than a criticism, but man, I really wanted Simon and Betty's adventures together to be a series of them getting injured in various wacky ways. More stuff like Simon slipping on the rock in the creek, and Simon getting hit by a jar of cherries in Come Along With Me.
You want some cherries with that chocolate syrup?
Oh, sure.
Catch!
Not just Simon, though. I would have liked to see Betty eat it too. I actually thought she was totally gonna get bit when performing her Viper technique. I would have really enjoyed if there was a thematic motif of them getting hurt on behalf of one another, but alas. Alrighty, let's finally chat a little bit about the so-called Last Scholar of Golb. Boy, I would have loved to see what BMO's playdates with Jerry were like. I have to assume BMO was the one who braided the beard hair of Billy's decomposing corpse that the Lich wears. That's adorable. The Lich recognizing Simon, despite him no longer having the physical appearance of Ice King, was also pretty neat.
Ice Wizard, so you have risen again.
I'm not sure what the Lich means by risen exactly, and I'm curious what hypothesis the Lich has in regards to how living beings egressed into this lifeless universe. He doesn't seem to be that surprised by the possibility of it happening, which is kinda peculiar. It checks out that the Lich would remember Ice King, since he was the one who defeated Bubblegum Lich with an impressive output of ice magic in the Season 2 finale, Mortal Recoil. The Lich loves to shit-talk Finn, so I bet he would also be shit-talking Simon a bunch, if not for the fact that...
He seems really depressed.
I have always seen the Lich as a lifestyle. You're not supposed to succeed at extinguishing all organisms from existence. It's supposed to be a perpetual, never-ending chase to snuff life out. I thought it made total sense for Jerry to slip into an anhedonic standstill and lose his sense of purpose after achieving his perceived goal, to the point where killing 3 more living beings doesn't even feel worth the effort. Turns out that the Lich also felt forsaken by Golb, but that's something to discuss in my next review. While Simon, Cake, and Fionna yucked about in Crap World, the Scarab had been forcibly summoned to a celestial destination where godly beings carry out bureaucracy. Neglecting his bounty hunter duties due to his fixation on usurping Prismo caught up to him.
Hey, Scrabby.
Orbo.
You're up, mate.
So hey, remember when Scarab confronted Prismo in episode 4?
Well, what brings you here, Scrabby?
No one calls me that anymore.
Scrabby was clearly wrong there, as Orbo immediately jumped to that nickname. Maybe the reason Scrabby thinks nobody calls him that anymore is because he hasn't even interacted with any other non-rogue deities in so long. By the way, I really liked Orbo.
Nice speech. Say goodbye to your legs.
I wonder if Orbo was partly based on the perfect sphere concept, something that exists as a mathematical abstraction but does not manifest in the real world. I don't know how many of you will get the reference, but shout out to the worst fucking character from Jujutsu Kaisen. While Scrabby fails to convince Orbo to let him finish his hunt, the unseen and presumably top-level boss grants Scarab his request. The God Auditor catches up to Simon right as an accidental portal to Golb opens and transports everyone into the unknown. What an exhilarating cliffhanger to end this astounding episode. Jerry was a hell of a ride. It was both bleak and jocose, as Adventure Time often is when things get wild. Before I go, a reminder to those who enjoy tabletop games, make sure to get in on that Card Wars Kickstarter before it's too late. As always, thanks to my patrons. This channel goes on a lot of hiatuses due to my major depression, but I only collect Patreon pledges for months where I upload videos. So if you've got some spare coin, consider supporting me so that I can afford rent. Take care, everyone.